Hey guys, so we are now less than a week away from the start of Big Brother 25, and I thought it'd be fun to do a Big Brother video for once. And I actually got the idea to do a video like this from one of my Discord members, QBoy51, who said it'd be a good idea to make a twist ranking, sort of similar to the one that I did for Survivor last year. And I did consider making a full on ranking, and I may end up doing one at some point anyway. But for this week, I did want to focus more on the worst twists in Big Brother history, as obviously Big Brother is far more known for having some controversial twists compared to Survivor. So in this video, I'll be breaking down the top 5 worst twists in Big Brother history, and I thought this might be a fun video to make. But before we get started, I wanted to bring up two honorable mentions here. One of them was the coup d'etat, which was first introduced in Big Brother All-Stars, but was more notably used in Big Brother 11, where Jeff was able to overthrow Shima's HOH, putting up Natalie and Jesse, and ultimately blindsiding Jesse in a pretty big move. And obviously, I had to consider it simply due to how broken and overpowered it was, as Jeff was basically able to really take over the game on eviction night, really blindside everyone there, and take out Jesse, who didn't even have a chance to campaign. But there are two reasons why I decided to not put it on. One is that Shima was at least given safety during this round, and even at the next HOH comp, she was allowed to participate, which did mitigate it to a degree, even though she was pretty upset by the whole result. And the other reason was that the power itself was limited to one round, and while it led to a pretty big move that impacted a lot of the season, the power itself did not translate to multiple rounds of overthrowing HOHs, which I think also mitigated it to a degree. In that, and also, it was just entertaining seeing this big blindside take place in such a dramatic fashion. So I feel like for those reasons, I didn't put that on. And then the other honorable mention is the pendant of protection from Big Brother 19, which basically gave Paul 3 weeks of immunity with basically no backlash. Now, yes, the dentation did say that each of the twists, including the pendant of protection, would come with a consequence, but that consequence didn't involve Paul at all. It involved Ramses having to volunteer himself on the block for the first 3 weeks, which really didn't affect Paul's game in the slightest, especially considering how dominant Paul's BB19 game was. Not to mention that it screwed over Cody as well during his HOH, where he wanted to backdoor Paul, until Paul whipped this thing out during the veto meeting, which not only gave Paul safety, but also let them know that Cody was after them, which informed their next HOH. And it also forced Cody to put up Christmas, the 5th person that Cody had put up during his HOH, which was a really weird set of circumstances, and ultimately allowed Paul to not only remain safe, but screwed over Cody in the long term. So, on the whole, it's a pretty bad twist, but sort of similar to the coup d'etat. It was mostly a one-time thing, only for the first 3 weeks of the season, which again is pretty early in the game, and it's obviously for that reason that I did not put it on. But with all that said, let's get into the top 5 now. So starting off at number 5, the 5th worst twist in Big Brother history to me is the rewind button from Big Brother 16, and this is a mostly unfair twist that not only nullified an entire round of gameplay, but resulted in a pretty bad outcome for the season, where at the final 5, Frankie won both the HOH and veto, giving him a lot of power to dictate the rest of the game. And considering that Frankie was a clear underdog at that point, he had a clear opportunity to take a shot at the core power structure, which he was able to do by putting up both Cody and Victoria. And by eviction night, it seemed like he was poised to get his way in taking out one of these players. And had he gone to that round, he would have been in a better position to get towards the end of the game by winning out. However, that was all undone by the rewind button, which rewound the entire week back to the HOH, basically undoing all the work that Frankie had done. Frankie would have needed to win the HOH and or veto again in order to secure his spot. However, things went wrong the second time, where first Caleb won the HOH, putting up Frankie alongside Victoria, and then after Cody won the veto, it basically left Frankie on the block where he was pretty much a goner at that point. So here you had a twist that basically undone a lot of the work that an underdog was doing to get through the game, and basically made it so that the underdog was guaranteed to go home on eviction night. So basically you have a pretty unfair twist that not only wasted our time, but ultimately led to a worse outcome. But the reason I have it at number 5 is simply because it was only a 1 round thing, and plus, even if the twist didn't happen, Frankie still would have needed to win Final 4 veto, as he couldn't compete in Final 4 HOH, So it still wouldn't have guaranteed that an underdog would have gone through the game, but the rewind twist definitely made it a lot harder. That and also the bad outcome makes this a pretty bad twist, which is why it's here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, we actually have another twist that was on the same season, but here we have the Battle of the Block from Big Brother 16 and part of 17. And this is another pretty questionable twist if you ask me, and one that I think played a pretty big factor on the season, where obviously it basically allowed two people to win the initial HOH comp, and each of them would put up two sets of nominees until this competition came into play where one of the HOHs would be dethroned should they lose it, and both the people that they put up would be safe, which made it so that it was harder for people on the bottom to win their way back, where they would not only lose power and potentially be vulnerable, but they had already put up two people that would now have a reason to go after them. And I feel like it's a big factor that contributed to people like a Derek dominating the game, where it made it harder for people on the outs to win these competitions, where now they had to not only win the HOH, but they also had to win the Battle of the Block in order to keep their noms and to really make a bigger impact on the game. And to me, that really goes against the spirit of Big Brother, where on any given week, anyone can win the HOH and do what they want to change the game. But by making it easier for the majority to hold onto their power by potentially winning an additional comp, it's just making it harder for the minority to really gain much traction. So I think this twist definitely played a bigger factor on BB16 than the rewind button did, which was only one round, which is part of the reason why it is above that twist. However, the main reason that's not higher is it still gives players plenty of autonomy, and plus, later on this season, they were able to account for it better. But I feel like as a twist, it's pretty bad. It really shook up the format of the game in a pretty bad way, which is why it's here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and this is another one-time twist per season, but this one's also been on a number of seasons, which I was pretty disappointed by. But here we have the night 1 eviction, or in some cases, a day 2 eviction. And to me, a lot of this just seems kind of unfair, where these players come into the house expecting to make a splash, expecting to really play the game of Big Brother, only for their fate in the game to be decided by a challenge. And while competitions obviously play a big factor in who gets power and who's vulnerable on Big Brother, the fact that a challenge is deciding everything, especially before these people have a chance to build genuine relationships, leads to them really being stripped of this opportunity before they even have a chance to play. And I do feel bad for all these players. You know, you have Jody from BB14, Glenn from BB18, Cameron from BB19. And there's some other cases as well, such as in BB9 and in BB21 with David. And plus, it feels like a waste where production spends all these resources casting these people, hoping that they'll make for good TV and to really make their show entertaining, only for them to be evicted so soon. So I feel like it's also bad from a production end. And really, it's only there to increase shock value and to make it so that the early days have some stakes involved. So I really wish that they would do away with these in the future, and I hope that they don't really screw anyone else again. But again, it's mostly a one-time thing per season. It happens right at the beginning, and then the rest of the season plays out normally. It's not like these other twists that play out over the course of an entire season. So it's for that reason I don't have it higher, but I still wish that they would do away with these in the future. Plus, I feel bad for the people that get screwed over by these, which is why it's here at number 3. Now I'm moving on to number 2, and for me, this was the pretty clear top 2. These are two twists that I don't really like at all. I feel like they go against the spirit of the game, and I really feel like they bring down the seasons that they appear on. And it's funny considering that these two twists appear in the same general era of the show. But at number 2, I did decide to go with Till Death Do You Part from Big Brother 9, and this is the pairs twist where every player is paired up with a different player, and for the first half of the game, if they were voted out, then they would be evicted as a pair. And to me, this really goes against the spirit of the game as well, where it really opens it up for an otherwise competent player to get screwed over by their partner, where by targeting their partner, they also get put into danger. And we see that really play out, especially in the first week, where we saw Jen and Parker being evicted, largely due to Jen's actions, but Parker also gets screwed over by this. And it's just not fun seeing these players have their destinies tied to other players. And I don't like it when it's done on other shows as well. Like we saw this twist play out during around Survivor South Africa. So I feel like it's a largely done twist. And I am kind of glad that it was ditched after a couple weeks, which is part of why it's not higher on the list, is because it is something that was dropped after a couple weeks. It wasn't something that lasted the entire season. And plus, I can kind of excuse it from a gain standpoint, as even though it's unfair for these players to have to think about other players, it is still technically social strategy where these players not only had to worry about their own relationships, but they also had to worry about the relationships of their partners. So I feel like that justification is enough to where I can't say it's the worst twist, but I still feel like it leaves plenty open for players to get screwed over, even if they are playing good games. So I feel like because of that, I do have to consider this one of the worst twists. And because of that, it is here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the worst twist in Big Brother history to me is America's player from BB8 and also appeared for a week on BB10. And to me, this is the worst twist because it's the one that strips the most agency for a particular player. Where Eric came into the game as a pretty competent player and someone that clearly showed a lot of potential. And we saw that through his ability to build relationships. But due to this twist, he was stripped of almost all of his agency across the game, where he wasn't allowed to make his own nominations, he wasn't allowed to make his own veto decisions, where there was even one week where he had the veto and could have used it, but because production didn't give America enough time to vote, he wasn't allowed to use it. And he couldn't even vote his own way on the jury. So I feel like this twist just stripped all agency from the player. And plus, America forced Eric to do things that was against his own best interests, such as the Final 9, where Dick was on the block after the veto and about to go home, until Eric was forced by America to campaign to save him, even though Dick and him weren't really allies. And Dick later went on to target Eric, which is pretty bad there, and not something that Eric would have done had he been allowed to act on his own will. But because he was America's player and had to do what America told him, it led to Eric doing things that was bad for his game. Where otherwise, Eric would have been in a very strong spot to dominate the game and be a very impressive player. And the fact that he was able to be so flexible and to still play a good game despite him basically having his hands tied behind his back is really impressive. But still, the fact that America was doing things for him, the fact that Big Brother insisted on this twist lasting for the entire season, and the fact that it screws over a pretty competent player and someone that was clearly there to play is probably the worst thing that I can say about Big Brother in the show's history in terms of what it's done. And for that reason, I feel like this is the worst twist in the show's history, which is why it's here at number 1. And there we go, that will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps out with the channel. Now obviously Big Brother 25 is about to start, so once that season starts, I'll be doing coverage for it, including power rankings, and I also plan to do some live streams as well during some of the live shows, so stay tuned for that. I also want to thank my patrons for supporting me and all my work, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, I'll leave a link for that in the description. And if you haven't already, be sure to join my Discord server, which you can join by clicking the link in the description as well. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that's the video. See ya.